This is the System Failure Podcast, number 52.
Hey, number 52, Brian. It is so good to be back into your studio here. I've been motoring up and down the East Coast for the past week and change, and we had to do one pod where I read the short story over my Bluetooth headphones, which sound quality. Hopefully, it wasn't too much of a drop off for our valued listeners, but it is really good to be back in the flesh. Hey, Brian? And by the way, that's a little Pink Floyd reference for you there.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Got to get that out of the way.
Yeah, yep. So it's been a week. I haven't seen you, I think, since in about 6 or 7 days. Oh, I guess it's more like 8 or 9 days, right? I can't quite remember. But, yeah, it was quite a voyage down to Jersey for me, trying to get essays published on time and podcasts out on time. You know, you don't really have a home or a place to type, so it's been quite a challenge.
Well, do you want to talk about your journey down to New Jersey at all, or should we talk about what I've been up to, or should we talk about our our listenership and our feedback, or how do we want to prosecute this?
All right. Well, I think that you should fill us in with an exciting update on your recent progress with respect to what are the two terms you use?
Discernment and cultivation.
Discernment and cultivation. So yeah, let's get an update from you, Brian, and then I'll talk briefly about my adventures down in New Jersey, and then we can get into some listener feedback at the very end. Sounds pretty exciting to me.
All right. Well, so I guess this is like the greater Jonathan Haidt saga. That's like where it all starts, but it's come like a long way, I think.
Right. There's been strains of JBP woven into this tapestry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I've done 2 open mic nights now, and I've been doing like the Kung Fu for I think 3 weeks. And
how many like Kung Fu sessions?
I think it's been 6.
6? And do you feel like, man, when you first start one of these martial arts, it is just like very basic, very humbling. What's your experience been?
Yeah, well, that is pretty much what it's like. Like you practice like this basic form, and you like don't know why you're doing it. But so they were having a workshop this weekend for the Kung Fu Wing Chun branch here in Portland or whatever, and so people were flying in from across the country. Whoa. And, I can see why you would fly to these Kung Fu meetups, because there's different schools who are related and the people know each other and whatnot. And you're supposed to call these people like your uncles and cousins and grandfathers, apparently.
Okay.
But, like what you do is you just mix up with different people and you just kind of like learn things from interacting with them. And I guess, I have more faith in the person who runs the local chapter, because there's definitely like some crazy people. But there's also some people who are really smart. There is this one guy who looks like he used to be in the military or be a fireman or something. And he was like, he showed his ability. Like he like punched like this plaster wall, and like his punching ability seems like on point, I guess.
Does the Kung Fu school appreciate having their plaster walls damaged? Is that part of the, is that like okay?
The wall was solid enough. It reminded me of like the situation bouncing his head off that plaster wall in Europe in that episode of the Jersey Shore.
Yeah, out in Florence. Yeah, that's a classic right there.
Well, the guy basically did that with his fist, and like obviously he like knows how to punch pretty effectively. But he was trying to explain to me about the points of Kung Fu, and the dude was like crazy. Just like he obviously knows how to fight, but his ability to like communicate is like terrible.
Wow.
Or at least the guy like David who runs the local chapter, I have a lot more appreciation for, like, he just has you do things, like you do these forms and you don't know why you're doing it, but like slowly the pieces kind of fit together. I mean, I've only been doing it for 3 weeks, and I kind of see, like, you do these things with your wrist, and what you're really trying to do is like stretch out your wrist and whatnot. And so because you can't like wrap your hands, which we used to do in boxing back in the day if you're going to be like in a street fight, and like there's just a lot of things that I don't know. I still don't really know, but I have like faith in what he's doing as like a teacher anyway, and he doesn't like make it too complicated. And it's hard to communicate like a complex idea of which you know nothing about what you're trying to learn or something. So yeah, I've been doing the Kung Fu too.
There's something about these communities that are looking for new members. Like, suppose we started like a system failure cult or something, where we had a storefront and wanted people to join, or if you started a church, a religious movement, or any of these things, like, the community aspect, it's going to attract people who are lacking, like, the community aspect of something like these public-facing clubs is going to attract people who are lacking that community aspect for one reason or another in their lives, and sometimes the reason is that they're defective or dysfunctional in some way. There's a reason why they've been punted from every community they've tried to be a part of, and so they filter down into these groups that are looking for new members, that are trying to expand their ranks. But boy, it is when you have an organization that's thirsty for new members, you sure are vulnerable to all manner of fiends showing up at your door who, like you say, they may be great at fighting, but man, lack communication skills or lack some kind of, there's just something missing in their playbook for how to interact with other people that's caused them to be cast out of communities and caused them to be thirsty for a community. So yeah, I can definitely see how that would happen. But do you feel that the Kung Fu practice has improved your mental health with respect to the Jonathan Haidt or the Jordan B. Peterson schools of thought?
Well, I think it's a good, I used to not think I had the only thing I used to have to do was smoke weed and play Magic the Gathering. And between this podcast and the comedy open mic nights and the Kung Fu and the hot yoga, I got more to do than I could possibly know what to do with.
I'm having that feeling of drinking from the fire hose too. but you're right, because what you can't do when you're drinking from the fire hose, you're not thinking about existential crises. It's it's anytime you've got something right in front of you, you've got to take care of. It has a way of chasing away the ghosts and demons that haunt the mind, eh?
Yeah, and so I don't know, if you're in a state of anxiety or depression or whatever, it really is this lower level of existence that's this crisis mode. But I guess I think you have to I think ultimately we've talked a lot about alchemy and sugar pills. What do you call that?
Placebo.
The placebo effect and why that all works and whatnot. And so, I think, if you want to practice what you preach, you really have to take the divinity of your experience seriously. And I think you have to try to listen to what the universe is trying to tell you. I guess is what my thinking is. And so, suppose you want some hot chick to like you or something. You've decided that she is a good mate for sexual reproduction, but she's unfortunately does not feel the same way about you, right? And so I'm sure anyone's run afoul of being denied in the relationship market, right?
Right. Jim is fond of Pam at the office, but alas, she's already with the much bulkier and terrifying looking Roy.
Right. Well, ultimately, maybe Jim's not the best example because he ultimately bags Pam, right?
Right. Well, yeah, the stories were written by a bunch of ridiculous theater nerds who have had a whole heaping helping of the experiences to which you allude. But yes, you're right. It's fictional.
Well, if you had your druthers, you could make it so that Pam likes you now or whatever. But you gotta have faith in the experience that there's gonna be some reason why Pam feels the way she does and why you feel the way you do, and there's some logic to it. Although I think I'm a believer in the grander, what you want to do is be in the connection to what your higher self, man, right? And your higher self, I think is the experience in its totality, because you're projecting this reality that you're experiencing, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Michelangelo has a look at the block of marble, discards all the excess that's imprisoning the David in there, and so doing, frees the former king of Israel from the block of marble, right? Isn't that so? But you have all these sensory experiences. You utterly forget the ones that don't match the narrative that you have for yourself. Is this what you're saying? And so you kind of mold or sculpt reality into a shape that matches the narrative right around in your head, eh?
Well, I think what I'm saying is if you want to believe in the divine nature of your attention or something, what you have to believe is that the experience that you're going through is special and happening for a reason. And so, things just aren't the way that you want them to be on your primal desires. But if something's making you depressed or unhappy, you gotta listen to what that is, right? Which I guess sounds easy, but if you're in the throes of heartbreak or depression or anxiety or trauma or PTSD or something, it's hard to do. But what is it that makes you makes one like have to like go on the P-Hub or smoke the weed or doom scroll on social media. Like what is that state of uncomfortability that makes it that you're looking for some kind of outside solution? Because ultimately, like, the outside solution is not gonna, none of those things are gonna bring you happiness, right? And like the solution is gonna be from some kind of internalization or like listening. I don't know. It's gonna come from something higher, right?
What does listening to this inner voice of yours, or your inner narrative, or your inner experience mean? Does that mean taking no for an answer when the hot chick doesn't like you back?
I mean, I think it all depend a lot on the situation. But I don't know. I think for me though, like I guess just where I'm at in this journey is what I've realized is it's a problem with authenticity, man. I definitely have a problem with authenticity.
How so?
Like, well, it's easy to tell the truth in situations where nothing is on the line, right?
Yeah.
And then, I mean, well, just in any given situation, it's going to be like harder to be authentic. And I guess one place it's hard to be authentic, you might say, is like hot chicks or something. There's something about the situation that's challenging, or at least to me, anyway. Or maybe just if you want one thing and you are in a negotiation with someone else who wants something else, I mean, that can be a situation in which it's hard to be truthful. Like negotiating your way through the world is oftentimes a battle of wills, right? And so dealing with that is, it can make authenticity a challenge. So, I mean, I'm not like a compulsive liar. I don't know. Some people I think just lie like all the time, but I don't know. Like it's hard to be authentic. I guess specifically around women, but I think there are like our crazy like family situation makes it hard to be authentic. There's something going on with that. I mean, it's a deep seated thing going on there or something for yours truly, and I'm like specifically trying to work on this problem. Like, and I just realized through doing the comedy that like in the comedy, like the comedy has to come from the heart is what I've learned from doing the open mic nights. Like all this preparation and this writing down, like when you're rehearsing things on stage, it has to come from the heart. And I guess
wait. When you're rehearsing before going on stage?
Well, like if you go and like read off a script, that's like not really...
Yeah,
like what you need to be is adapting what you're doing to the audience in the specific moment, right?
That's what I would expect. You have to like feel the crowd and know what, you have to feel the timing, right? Just having words on a page doesn't have any of that. There's no timing at all.
Yeah, and I guess the stress of like trying to negotiate with attractive women, like what you want to do is like prepare something instead of be in the moment, or at least that's how I feel. And like it's like the suffer from the same problem. Like I think it's like probably a standard nerd defense. So I imagine a lot of people struggle with this. Is that like you rationalize yourself away from like what your heart desires or something. Yeah. Like your rationality becomes like an obstacle rather than just a tool for accomplishing certain ends, right?
Yes. Okay. So what you're saying makes me think of like if you're insecure about who you are, or you don't feel good about your own perception of yourself, that creates a gap between stimulus and response, right? Something happens, and you, rather than reacting organically to it, you first ask yourself, how will I look to others reacting in this way? And then you react with respect to other people rather than with respect to whatever the stimulus was. There's an extra degree of freedom, or an extra layer of decision making that comes from not feeling good about yourself, that causes, because you're trying to conceal this thing that you're conscious of. You're trying to be this other thing, and it's that occupies so much of your processing power that talking to someone who's really attractive, like their attractiveness is distracting, and the fact that you are trying to present yourself in an artificial way is also distracting, and now you've got barely any processing power left to think of something intelligible to say. So I don't know, I kind of think you do, like the way you just want to get back to the felt presence of immediate experience, get back to the present moment, and don't allow this whole mental framework of I am conscious of being person A, I would like to be perceived as person B, and trying to hide A and promote B takes up all of your, that you just end up focusing on that rather than thinking of something good to say. So I think you just want to create a bridge over that gap between stimulus and response. So I do it too. I tend to try to measure my responses to what I imagine other people expect or expect or what I think they would appreciate or something like that. But really, no one wants that level of conniving, right? Everyone just wants your authentic reaction. And you just have to be confident. You just have to have supreme confidence that the thing will pop into your head that is going to be funny or is going to be appropriate to say in any given moment, whatever the interaction may be. So yeah, that's interesting. Authenticity. What else have you been? Have you discovered? Is this the main takeaway from the past week or so of comedy and kung fu? Authenticity. Have you got other pieces? I have a good segue to authenticity, but I want to get out all of your lessons from the past week before I move on.
Well, I think the authenticity is like a lower level idea than sort of believing the divinity of one's experience.
Okay, so authenticity is like one example of living your divine or realizing your divinity. Maybe?
Yeah.
But there's obviously going to be other components. Like, what are some of these other components?
Well, what comes to mind readily are the challenges that I'm dealing with. And the authenticity I can see is a major one. Just in doing, it's a problem in, doing the podcast and doing the open mic nights and in trying to talk to hot chicks, which are all things that I think about a lot.
Okay, yeah. That's one thing I've enjoyed about being on this side of the podcasting microphone versus on the listening end, where I usually am, is you can really try to, it's interesting to, I have this conception that the success of this podcast will depend on how much courage we can muster to be authentic in our job as podcasters here. So the more you can accurately represent what you're seeing, the more valuable the podcast will be to other people. Whereas if I'm up here posing, then people just going to turn us off, and that'll be that.
But I guess what I would say about the divinity is, it's an ongoing battle not to go on the P-Hub. I had a minor P-Hub relapse.
Oh!
But so...
Well, there's some authenticity for you.
I made it, since the Tuesday before the one before last. So, for 2 weeks and 5 days, something like that. In that period of time, I went on the P-Hub 2 days. And I'm back on I think I'm 4 days off the P-Hub. But anyway, I just bring it up though, because what is it that makes me want to go to the P-Hub? Or when I was getting ratchet on the daily, what made me want to smoke the weed every day? And I think that going on the P-Hub or smoking the weed, I think it ends up being a major obstacle to believing in the divinity of your experience, because you specifically, there's some feeling that you're trying to escape, right? And with doing any drug, drinking is an obvious example, because you have this acute hangover.
Ugh.
And that is the feeling of the devil leaving your veins, and to some extent white knuckling it through P-Hub or the weed withdrawal. When a Memorial Day weekend, I wasn't doing that much, and I was seriously white knuckling it with regards to the weed and the P-Hub, man. But that feeling though is kind of also the devil leaving your veins, that feeling of white knuckling it. And so, yeah, those uncomfortable feelings. There's a lot going on there that I think. Listening to your higher self or something, or finding that is a part of it's paying attention to that, and those feelings of uncomfortability are I don't know, they're just really important. But I don't know, well Jesus did it. He it was the ultimate example, right, of sacrificing himself because he believed in the higher divinity of it all. Anyway, there's this girl on YouTube, Gabby Covalenta, who I've been listening to, and she sounds super new agey, but this is what she talks about, is connecting to your higher self, And I don't know. She has these 20-minute videos that I've been listening to at work a lot lately. And
All right.
I've been digging it. So that's what I've been into.
Well, good for Gabby.
So anyway, there's your weekly status update.
Okay, so on the subject of like with that feeling, that cloying feeling when you're like, man, you just can't take it. You're like the sweat running down your brow, your eyes are darting. You're like desperate to hit that P hub.
Yeah.
Like that. I think that you need to have some dopamine every once in a while in order to maintain good cheer, in order to maintain your integrity as a unified like character, in order to stay sane. That's really, if you don't have any dopamine, you're gonna just become less and less sane over time. And it's really how often you need dopamine. I think depends on your like how quick your cycles are, or how like your time horizon, the time horizon across which you consider your well-being, right? For me, it's like a day. Like I really just need to have some dopamine. I can go on a dopamine desert all day long, but once I get to 2 or 3 days in a row with no dopamine, it really becomes you're just not able to maintain your good cheer and not able to think properly. You do become like psychotic or insane or something.
Okay, well, it sounds like what you're saying is you need to smoke the weed like once every 3 days. But see, that's like, I mean, if you want dopamine, dude, you like go for a run or something. I mean, there's like positive ways to build this that aren't going to put you into some kind of. I mean, the thing about like smoking the weed is like the dopamine withdrawal, and then you're really just in this battle. You're not having like this honest connection with the world, which you're in this like sub feedback loop that's like artificially derived from this drug, right?
Yes, so 2 things. We lead our whole lives of these artificial constructs, and if you have the sort of job where you're at work until it's dark out, and then you come home to an empty apartment, it's like, how are you supposed to get your dopamine? You want to, like to what you're saying, you want to get your dopamine in constructive versus destructive ways. You want the dopamine to build you up versus leech your life force from you.
You don't like come home to an empty apartment.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, if you're like on your own, and like let's just say you're like the worst of both of us. You've got no social skills and tons of student loan debt, and you're on your own. Like what are you supposed to do in that situation? Well, I mean, I really don't think that like just smoking the weed, like I don't know, going through a dopamine desert and then smoking the weed once in a while. You got to do what you got to do to like become like an adult. But it's saying that's actually like a good remedy for the situation, I think, is pretty. That'd be like some low level thinking.
Well, it's not a remedy for the situation. You end up in a cul-de-sac or a whirlpool. You said smoke weed every 3 days, but I think the radius of the diameter of your carousel, like how big a loop you're on, it could. So I think the longer it is, the more of a winner you are. Right? If you're able to delay gratification for 2 or 3 days, well, that's great. For me, it's like 1 day. And by the way, I think this has a lot to do with being overscheduled as kids, right? I think that our time horizon for making sacrifices is so short that we're not able to, that just the way that we had our schedule packed as kids means that 24 hours is as far as I can look into the horizon. And I heavily discount anything good or bad that's going to happen in more than 24 hours. It's very easy for me to discount because I was living my life for 6 years, 1 day at a time, just trying to survive 1 day at a time. And that's just how my whole motivational structure is built around that. I do think that I think that ultimately it's not a terrible thing to have easy sources of dopamine that can augment, but you just can't have that. Like you can eat some junk food, right? It's not the end of the world if you have an ice cream cone. That brings pleasure. I wouldn't say it's a bad thing to have ice cream every once in a while if it augments your life. But if you get stuck in a carousel where you need to have ice cream every day and that's where you get your dopamine from, now that's a big problem. You need to make sure, in other words, that let's say 80% of your dopamine comes from constructive behaviors or creative endeavors versus consumptive endeavors where you're playing someone else's video game or like that because you're getting dopamine for free. That's a dangerous devil's bargain, which I think can have its uses if you just are parsimonious about how you deploy the free dopamine hits. So I don't think it's some disaster, but there is a trap that is involved with free dopamine hits from the P hub or from smoking weed or whatever it may be. So that's what I think. But I see you going out and getting dopamine in constructive ways. What did you call it? I keep forgetting the two words.
Discernment and cultivation.
Thank you. Discernment. I'm going to have to write these down so I can stop forgetting them during the pod. Discernment and cultivation, right? Discernment meaning discerning which dopamine intensive activities are constructive and which are consumptive. And then discernment, and what was the other one? Cultivation. Yeah, so that's the cultivation. That's the cultivation speaks to consumptive versus creative creative activities, where you can program a video game, and that's creative. Playing someone else's video game, consumptive. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and I hope that if anyone's listening to this podcast that's in one of those crazy pits of depression where you're just, maybe even it's not even a day, your carousel is a few hours, and you just can't go more than a few hours without some kind of dopamine. Otherwise, you start to feel insane. Hopefully, folks will hear the change in your voice over the past couple of weeks and maybe sign up for Kung Fu or go get humiliated at stand-up comedy or something, anything that is creative versus consumptive. So I don't know, man. I think this is awesome. You seem substantially different over the past few weeks than you had prior to that. I'm sure our valued System Failure listeners on the other end of the microphone will totally agree with that assessment.
The discernment and cultivation is not really about dopamine in particular. I mean, it's about... I just think that's a really basic way to... I don't think that really does it justice, I guess. It's about more than dopamine. I mean, I think it's about, like what you're trying to discern is, like, what is cultivative and, like, what is cultivating... Like, your attention is cultivating, right? Like putting your attention towards, like, that feeling when you feel like you have to go on the P-Hub. Like, is gonna... Like, that withdrawal feeling is the devil leaving your veins, like I was saying. And so, I don't know, that just... Like, to boil that down to it being about cultivating dopamine, I just don't think it's really... Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think so. So let me give a little simile here, and you tell me if I am picking up what you're putting down. Bear with me. Do you recall the pensive in Harry Potter?
I do.
The thing where, you tap your temple with a magic wand and pull a memory out your head and then put it into this swirling chalice where you can store them, I guess. It's like if you turn the lens of consciousness around so that it's facing back at its origin source, right? This is what meditation's all about, in my view. If you use your telescope of consciousness and focus it in on consciousness itself and create that loop that's symbolized by the magical symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. If you do that, now, with that feeling that was that urge to go on the P-Hub, that feeling that was a part of you, you now have the subject-object relationship to that thing. Like, you are a subject observing this other thing. And by definition, that almost makes it external in the way that those thoughts become external once you pull them out of your forehead with the magic wand. Is that illustrating the point? Like, if you focus on that feeling, well, now that feeling is not part of the focuser. That feeling is the object of the focusing. Close?
I think there's probably something going on with that.
Yeah. So, like, it doesn't affect you anymore. Like, this feeling of this urge to go on the P-Hub, where it was part of your, when you were unconscious of it or not focused on it, it was a part of your being. But now your being is focused on it, and anything your being is focused on is by definition not your being, right? And so you now have, like, focusing on it as objectively as you can, it might be the way to overcome these urges that motivate us from the depths of our limbic systems and the ancient reptilian parts of our brain that fire automatically and without conscious direction, right? So I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. Hopefully,
right. Well, and like with regards to the connection to your higher self, like if no hot chicks want to have sex with you, I mean, like if you're like depressed or whatever, yeah, and like getting with some hot chick and like getting her pregnant or something, you think that's gonna be like. Things are the way they are for like a reason, right?
Well, yeah, so if you so there's two reproductive strategies for us lads, right? You can either just fire and forget and be like Genghis Khan and impregnate thousands of women and then not even meet your offspring, or you can remain with one young lady and invest with her in those offspring. And I think that the latter category is likely to lead to much more happiness and fulfillment in the finale, in the long run, even though the former may seem irresistible in the short term. in the long term, there's something divine about that image. It's why the mother with a little child is like this holy image in every single culture throughout the world. Horus and Isis, Jesus and Mary. I mean, you name it. The mother and child, Persephone and Isis, is like this universal religious symbol. I'm just channeling Jordan B. Peterson here. He turned me on to this. I can see that he's exactly right. This conception of making sacrifices for this future thing, that's divinity right there. And smoking pot or checking out the P-Hub has no long-term benefit, only the short-term boost in dopamine. And so therefore it's a fundamentally different activity than impregnating a hot chick, but then sticking around and raising that kid and going through decades with this person, having a profound relationship, you know the list. So I think that there is a departure from divinity that comes with short-term, non-sacrificial thinking, and a cleaving to divinity that comes with long-term sacrifices with the view to the long term. Right? That's what a cathedral is. It's the result of a multi-generational building strategy. It's a way of saying, well, there are some things greater than my individual ego, my individual self, and so I'm going to lay the cornerstones to this cathedral that I know I'll be in the casket moldering hundreds of years before it's ever finished. I mean, they didn't even put the marble facade on the Florence Cathedral until like the 1800s. These things take hundreds and hundreds of years, but it's a demonstration of the power of thinking multi-generational strategies. So yeah, I think that the length of the dopamine circuit is proportional to the amount of divinity that you're going to experience in your life. Maybe if you're making really long-term making sacrifices now for really long-term goals and getting dopamine when as you see progress go on towards that goal, that's going to be mentally healthy. But if you're stuck in the spin cycle going round and round in the P-Hub or smoking pot every day, then you will end up in a hell that the English language is scarcely adequate to describe. But that so is that another way of saying what you were saying?
All right. Well, I was on board, and then you start going at it with the dopamine again. But anyway, I guess that's probably.
I'm just talking about
litigated.
cycles. I don't think I said the word dopamine in that last sentence. Did I?
I'm pretty sure you did.
Maybe
you started
I did.
talking about the dopamine hit reward over a longer period of time. But anyway, well, it's just like when understanding that like the depression or whatever is part of the divinity. It's just hard for me to try to think about that in terms of dopamine. Seems crazy to me, but
we'll just call it happiness or good feeling. Like whatever it is. I don't mean to reduce this whole thing down to chemicals. I'm just using dopamine as a way to sound smart and talk about feeling happy. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I guess what feels good is like sort of like being in alignment like with your true self or whatever, man. So.
Yeah, and our true self wants sacrifices for future good. Or am I going too far? And am I one bridge too far? Like divinity, right? Looks like what is Jesus' whole thing? The ultimate sacrifice. Sacrificing with a view towards future goals.
Well, sacrificing for the future, it's like important, but it's like sacrificing for the future, like why it's like important to be authentic in the moment. It's more like just because not being authentic is like damnation. And so it's not really about like sacrifice. What sacrifice is like it's like doing what's hard is being authentic when they're against pressure not to. And I guess maybe the thing is like people are going to like you more if you're authentic anyway. So it's really like, it's really not a sacrifice to be like authentic. So
it definitely can be. You speaking the truth, if you speak the truth, like you can get like fired from your. If you say what you really think, you can be. There can be speaking the truth can come at a heavy price.
It could, but what kind of situations? I don't think I really live in the kinds of situations. You need to go to work and like litigate like politics or something. Where it's not like someone's gonna come and like persecute you for like your beliefs or something.
Well, it just so happens, Brian, that I have some anecdotes to relate about New Jersey that are perfectly illustrate the point about authenticity.
Great. Well, we can move on and talk about your travels in New Jersey. It sounds good.
Okay. Authenticity. Well, we should relate it back to everything you just said, though. This is an example now where Trace and I were like, how authentic should we be in this situation? So we went to Jersey, and like me, everyone in New Jersey is like I always thought of myself as Team Blue. It wasn't really until the betrayal of Bernie Sanders in 2016 that I was like, oh, I can never vote blue again. But the folks, the good people in New Jersey, they don't. It's not that Trace and I just didn't want to talk politics at all. We just we're not gonna, we're not here for politics. We're here to catch up with old friends and talk about old times and whatnot. But there would be like comments that, this person, we're going to talk bad about this person because they like Trump, and they just go into that mode, assuming that you're going to be totally on board with it. And it happened like a couple of times. One of our friends down there, two of our friends down there are a married gay couple, and they're like, I don't know, like with them. Like for me, my big issue is student loans, so it was very easy for me to see the corruption of the Democratic Party. But the Dems have been the champions of the whole LGBTQ scene for reasons that are economically expedient, I believe. But if you are a part of this LGBTQ community, it's going to be really hard to if these people have been championing your pet cause all this time. It's going to be really hard to see through the economic sham, right? And so, like, you could bring up examples of Democratic fecklessness, like the abortion thing, where Obama ran on codifying Roe v. Wade in 2008, got into office, found himself with both branches of the Congress under Democratic control and the executive, the White House, and didn't do anything on Roe v. Wade because, like we've said 1,000 times, it's like one of those aged quarterbacks that you need to keep around on the bench so you can put them back in the game. And then the student loan debt is another good one. Like the Biden administration said they want us to believe that they're trying so hard to cancel all of our student loan debts, or they're trying so hard to codify Roe v. Wade, and it's just those darn Republicans getting in the way every time. But then you look into it and you're like, well, okay, the Biden administration based their legal rationale for the debt forgiveness in the 2021 COVID era HEROES Act. And so of course it got tossed out at the Supreme Court level. If they had merely chosen the 1965 Higher Education Act signed by Lyndon Baines Johnson at his alma mater in Texas, then they could have easily forgiven student loan debt. I mean, it's not hard to do. And I know that the Biden administration knew that because the people at debtcollective.org were sending people to the White House to explain to the administration, you're using a faulty legal rationale. You need to use the 1965 Higher Education Act. And they didn't do it because they want to appear, well, it's like the Washington Generals, right? The team that plays against the Harlem Globetrotters. Oh, what do you know? Darn it. The Harlem Globetrotters won again. The Washington Generals managed to blow it somehow. But like, this is a case where being authentic, like people are going to, it is like people are really into this, like Trump versus the vice president thing. To where, and they would just make comments that just assume that you're on board. So do you stop and interject and be like, well, actually, I'm going to have to vote for the Jill Stein, the cat lady, because I can't vote the Democrats in good conscience. And I'm like rooting for the Donald to win because it's just because the Democrats are so awful. But I also agree with zero of the Donald's policies and can't really see myself pulling the lever there. How much do you like? That's a situation where there might be real penalty when when you're a part of a group and there's like safety in numbers, right? But then when you distinguish yourself as not part of that group, now you have an issue, right? You're going to take a popularity hit. You're going to potentially be ostracized from the group. Now, none of that would happen. What you're saying, what you said earlier, Brian, people are just going to like you better the more authentic you are. And also, in this instance, these people are lower. They're just not tuned into politics. They just haven't realized that everyone that gets ejected from the bubble of corporate media, your Russell Brands, your Tucker Carlsons, every one of these people, they just turn on and assume that they're crazy people, right? They just assume RFK Jr. is a kook. Everyone who's outside of the bubble of the mainstream media. But more and more people are leaving that bubble and turning on it. Chris Cuomo, another example. More and more people are leaving that bubble and turning on it. They just haven't caught wise to the ruse yet. So I don't know. What do you think, Brian, in this context? What do we do about authenticity?
I guess it's a good question. People with crazy political beliefs.
Well, they're predictable. They're not crazy, right? They just haven't dug into it, and they just believe whatever the vibe is on mainstream media.
I guess I think, probably talking to people about politics who like know nothing about politics, it's like talking to someone about like authenticity or whatever we were just talking about to someone who's like in the throes of like a drug or P-Hub addiction or something.
It's gonna be tough to break through.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. See, I was having a conversation with someone recently. Well, I was getting oysters with a couple people, and the topic of whether Dave Chappelle is like a transphobe came up.
Oh, good Lord! Yeah, so what did you do?
Well, I mean, what I said was, some of the people there felt that Dave Chappelle wasn't a transphobe, and some people felt that he wasn't.
Okay.
And so what I said was that Dave Chappelle, well, his third Netflix special, I believe, was completely about trans people. And, he does tell that story about his trans friend who ultimately offed herself.
Wasn't there, was this the most recent or the penultimate Chappelle?
It is the second to last one. Because in his last one, he talks about how the reception of the last one went. And he does a few more jokes about the trans folks. Anyway, and what I said is that, he does have a whole special devoted to the trans issue. Now, as to whether making jokes about trans people is in of itself transphobic is kind of a separate debate, which the pro-trans people took to be as like a victory for their cause. And then the dude who felt that Dave Chappelle was not a transphobe felt I didn't go far enough in defending Dave Chappelle. I don't know. Like, you don't want to go into a situation or... Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I really don't know everything. I mean, I just have, like, my opinion. And so, I don't know. It's crazy when people have, like, feel like God is on their side on whatever issue and that they're right to castigate whoever doesn't agree with them. That's, like, a pretty wild place to be.
Yeah.
And so when you're up against that kind of issue and you're just, like, a rationalist in that you're not, like... you're just calling it as you see it, and you're not like, you don't feel like someone's the devil who disagrees with you. Like, how do you negotiate with people who are like riding their high horse around or whatever? That's like a really good question.
Yeah, when people feel that persecuting you is the right, or not persecute, that whatever the social penalty is for disagreeing with them, if they feel that you should pay that social penalty and that they're justified in leveraging it against you, that is a scary situation.
So, I guess probably the answer is some kind of verbal judo or something. And so I guess I was reasonably satisfied with how I handled the Dave Chappelle thing. Like, we didn't really get into like what Dave Chappelle actually said. Probably a good question for the people who felt that Dave Chappelle was a transphobe. Like, what were the actual jokes? Because we just decided that Dave Chappelle was a transphobe without considering what it was that he actually said.
Yeah, that'd be a good question to put to the pro Dave being a transphobe crowd. Be like, what statement did he make that you find to be transphobic? And they're not going to have one, right? They're not really going to...
Well, I mean, maybe they'll have a good case in point as to... like with J.K. Rowling, right? Because just with the Summer Olympics, there was that whole thing where there was that boxer who, she looked a little mannish, and it turned out she had failed some chromosome test, and another woman, like, quit the tournament in protest. But it turns out that, she was, like, born with a vagina, and she just has some kind of chromosome issue. Yeah. And so, like, J.K. Rowling went on Twitter and said some shit as though she were, like, a trans, like, male to female person. And so, maybe those comments were incorrect. However, I mean, though it's like unclear now, how do we feel about like Leah Thomas, the actual male to female competing in women's sports? Because, because I guess we're mad at J.K. Rowling about this, but I mean, we just had this situation with Leah Thomas. So, like, what is the right thing to do about all that there? It remains to be seen. Well, I mean, I think the answer is obvious in that, if the women are comfortable having you in their locker room and compete in their sports, then, God bless. And, if not, then, you're probably not allowed in. Sorry. That's how I would handle it.
Go ahead, carry on.
And then just, of course, any woman who wants to compete in men's sports and use the men's locker room, like, welcome to Team Alpha and, God bless.
Yeah, there are some exclusions. We sometimes exclude people. We sometimes implement exclusions for safety reasons, and like the rush to get rid of any and all exclusion and just painting exclusion as a bad thing. You're like, look, I don't want. If I'm 10 years old, I don't want to play ice hockey against an 18-year-old. You're going to get destroyed. We had this one postgraduate at our high school. I just remember being at one of the varsity games, and he was like this black dude who was like 19.
I remember seeing that guy. He was like a Greek statue.
Oh, he had a perfect body. He had dreads, and he was just destroying kids who were 15 and 16. I remember one of them got taken away in an ambulance for internal bleeding. It just goes. The league was he was within the league rules, being a post grad, and it's not like he broke any rules. But you can just see where exclusion sometimes is there for safety reasons, and we should respect it for that reason, if for no other. But it's an interesting question.
Well, anyway, so when you're dealing with like crazy zealotry, I think judo is how you're supposed to deal with it. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm like, I was there for that situation about the Dave Chappelle, and so like, I kind of was able to give a breakdown. I wasn't there for the full situation. I don't know exactly what was said or how it all went down, but judo would be the answer, and maybe I could have litigated the issue better, but you can kind of see my thoughts on the matter.
All right, well, I'll just draw one last analogy here too. Like I mentioned earlier, that sometimes the free dopamine rush, the free feeling of happiness, if that would please Brian, the feeling, the good feeling that comes from smoking weed or going on the P-Hub, fleeting as it may be, like there is like room for, okay, we don't need to be completely authentic, right? If your boss asks you how you're doing today, you don't tell them about your intestinal troubles, right? So there is like
your struggles with the P-Hub.
Yeah, so maybe we'd ought to be like 80% authentic. I felt like I should have been more authentic in Jersey. You felt like you were happy with your level of authenticity at the Oyster Bar. But maybe like an 80-20 composition between authenticity and verbal judo, or an 80-20 composition between constructive versus consumptive feelings of happiness, or something like that. Like if you're getting 20% of your good feelings from smoking the weed, I don't think that's going to kill you. Well, you start getting up higher, and now you're going to be chasing ghosts. You're going to be in a carousel of chasing that feeling of well-being, but never getting anywhere constructive, and that's just going to lead to that feeling of being trapped in hell.
Well, with the authenticity, I think there's like the right amount of authenticity, and I think, well, see, like the cultivation and discernment helps in that. I just didn't really realize to what degree I think the authenticity was a problem. And so I like doing the yoga has like this causal effect in my ability. There's downstream consequences. Now I like I've come to realize to what degree the authenticity is like an issue.
Yeah.
So that's what like the cultivation discernment is about, more than like dopamine. Right? I guess that's why that's like not about like dopamine so much, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, dopamine, it really can just stand in as a metaphor for the whole limbic system, or what your whole mentality or consciousness, whatever.
Right.
I see why you didn't want to restrict the conversation to dopamine.
Well, anyway, but I mean, I guess your point about having like the occasional like bit of junk food or whatever, I mean, I guess that makes sense. See, the thing about like the weed, man, is it like, I don't know, it just has like a huge impact. Like especially if you haven't gotten ratchet in a long time, like a little bit of weed like really shoots you off to the moon.
Oh man, there's like a weed hangover. Now it's a pleasant feeling. You're like kind of like, but there's it like the effects last for like days. Definitely, I totally agree. It'll send you for a loop.
I mean, the alcohol hangover is brutal, but I feel like it does go by relatively fast until you're like basically like you don't. It's not like hard to think. Which I think the weed does do to you.
Yeah.
That's the thing about the weed hangover, which I guess I wouldn't describe it as pleasant, but I mean, to each their own.
Oh, I like that floaty, cloudy feeling of a weed hangover. It's most lovely.
The inability to cognate.
Yeah. Well, a nice cup of coffee in the morning, and a nice J-bone at night, you could really get strung out for days on that cycle. But you're right. You're going to end up in, like you say, you're going to end up circling the parking lot in hell doing that.
Okay. All right. Well, do you have anything else you want to say about New Jersey, or what about our pressing listener feedback here?
Yeah. Well, okay. So we've actually got two pieces of listener feedback. The first one is you may recall that the quickie this past week was all about the Knights Templar, a period where there was a mysterious secret society in Britain, and then the rise of the Freemasons in the 18th century. Right, and I normally keep my essays to just the basics. The system failure constellation of ideas involves like a simplified view of history, or a simplistic view of history that's easy to pass from one mind to another. And so I try to keep my historical, the touchstones of history that I have to bring up and juggle here in the essay series. I try to keep them to what you can just easily look up on Wikipedia, like nothing crazy or controversial. But for this point about the Masons and the Knights Templar and banking and the Peasants' Revolt of the summer of 1381, I had to delve into like kind of we're talking about secret societies here. You know, the middle volume of the System Failure Constellation of Ideas Volume 2 ends in the rise of banking and the concomitant rise of secret societies, because in all times and places, the ruling class is trying to dam up history. They want to preserve a status quo, which is lucrative for them, no matter how horrifying it is for other people. And that's why the rise of banking was accompanied by the rise of secret societies. But we know the Rothschilds actually exist and that they run a massive bank, for example. But the details of what they're planning to do, you're really starting to get into some like the mists of time, and secret societies compound that problem because they're not honest about who they are or what they're doing. It's a tough one. So I posted the essay to our, we have a subreddit, reddit.com/r/system failure, but we've not been directing anyone there. I've just been posting the essays there as placeholders. We haven't told our listeners about it. I guess someone could look at either of our Reddit profiles and see that we're the moderators of r/system failure, but I've just posted the essays, and as far as I know, no one has seen them until I posted the thing about the Freemasons. And I got, if you go on r/system failure, you see that one essay got one downvote, and then someone claimed to be a Freemason that went through. It was really weird because this particular essay, I included a huge passage from, this essay was 1/3 my writing, and then in the further materials section, I just included the entire introduction from a book written about the Freemasons. And the person who responded didn't really seem to realize that only the first third was my words. He was refuting. He said this particular book is not reliable, but then didn't seem to realize that I was quoting from the book with all the italics. But the point is, this person is clearly a Mason, and they're clearly out to debunk whatever, there couldn't possibly be a connection between the Knights Templar, the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, and the rise of the Masons after the timeline is, about the first Black Friday when the Pope and the King of France destroyed the Knights Templar, Friday, October the 13th, 1307.
I think I've mainly heard about it from you.
Well, I guess that's a good thing. That was the first Black Friday. And the idea here, the King of England kind of dragged his feet in arresting the Knights Templar and seizing all their property. He wrote back to the Pope being I don't think that the Knights Templars are guilty of perversions and devil worship. This doesn't seem right. Then the Pope issues a bull and he's forced to carry it out. But that 3 months allowed the Templars, instead of being surprised by the Order 66, kill all the Jedi, secret orders unsealed all over France, that morning of Friday the 13th. And then, of course, that's 1307. 1381, there's a Peasants' Revolt, which no less Barbara Tuchman, who wrote she wrote that book, The Guns of August. It was Kennedy's favorite book about World War I. And Tuchman also wrote this book called A Distant Mirror, the history of the 14th century, which included the Peasants' Revolt, in which she said that the Peasants' Revolt shows every sign of being organized by an underground secret society. This is 60 years after the Knights Templar were persecuted. Winston Churchill goes even further and explicitly says, there's a secret society. They would meet in London. They're the ones that touched off the Peasants' Revolt. And then, so that's the 14th century. And then you have the whole Protestant Reformation happens. The Treaty of Westphalen resubjugates the popes politically below the crowned heads of Christendom with the Treaty of Westphalen in 1648. And then in 1692, you get your first ever central bank, just a couple decades later. That power vacuum left by the popes is replaced by banking. And then 20 years after that, the Freemasons say, all right, we're here. We're going to announce our presence in 1717 in London. So it was just really interesting to me that this person claims themselves to be a Mason, but they could be totally trying to obfuscate this connection between the banking houses and Freemasonry and the Knights Templar and the Peasants' Revolt. They may believe that the Freemasons do have no connection to the Knights Templar, but they could also have no. But they're going to be somewhere in the hierarchy. They're going to be there's 33. There's 33 degrees in Freemasonry. They're going to be. They could be being. They may not be privy to all the secrets of the Freemasons, even though they're part of the organization, right? So the fact that this person is themselves a Mason means that we can't trust that. I just can't. Nothing they say. I just have no idea how earnest they are and no idea how confused they might be. Like the one person who we can't talk to the Freemasonry about are the Masons themselves, right? So yeah.
Did you make some kind of reply?
I didn't. I'm not sure what to do about it exactly. But the thing that fascinates me is that we didn't tell anyone about this subreddit. So and I look in their history and they're posting all over Reddit about the Masons. So it seems like their job is just to search for Freemasonry on Reddit and then go and comment on whatever posts they find.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's not like, that. I think that's pretty unsurprising.
Yeah. Well, it does make me like not at all trust their not so lettered refutation.
I mean, it could just be like an AI bot or something. But yeah, I mean that's like totally normal.
Yeah, it's normal. Well, it was just really, really strange. I don't know. I was like, wow, how did they find it? Like, but there really must be they must have some kind of a thing that whenever Google indexes another search term, whenever Google indexes Freemasonry on Reddit, they get a notification and go to that page and I don't know refute whatever's being said about the Masons. I don't know.
Well, I have not been on our subreddit recently. Yeah. I'll be interested to go in there and have a look-see and see what the situation is.
I mean, it's really eye-rolling. I mean, the man who founded the Bank of England was also a noted Mason. It's not that tenuous a connection to make. But I have delved. We're getting into secret societies here, and so you kind of have to go on rumor and legend a little bit to the extent that we had a Masonic temple in our hometown. There are signs all over Portland here that has this. If you look at them, you can see the square and the compass, and it's like your local Mason chapter. We had this in our hometown of Norway, Maine. We had this windowless building where people would meet. And I get the one thing you can't, when people come out of that building and you ask them what they're doing in there, you can't just believe them. They don't have windows for a reason. They are a secret society for a reason. But anyway, so
just fundamentally, the guy was uncomfortable with connecting like Freemasons to the banking houses.
Very emphatic about. Well, so the Knights Templar were like the first international bankers. That's their thing. So the man wanted no connection with the Knights Templar and no connection to the banking houses and definitely no connection to the mysterious goings on of the summer of 1381 when the peasants revolt. 100,000 peasants marched on London. It was a crazy scenario. The King of England was 14 years old. He had to deal with this. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Well, I'm not that. I'm not like an expert on history like you. But I don't know. I think you got to come up with some kind of reply.
I think so too. The reply might just be, listen, man, you're admitting to be a Mason. I can't. Obviously, you're completely discredited. Like nothing you say on this topic could possibly ever hold even a grain of significance. We don't know if you're in earnest, and we don't know if you yourself are perceived by the upper echelons of your secret society. It's like,
I mean, probably if they're trying to, it probably means you're hitting on the truth. I can't think of like a sure sign, right?
That was really the reason I bring this up. It does seem like
you should reply with that.
Yeah, like we're getting flack here. That must mean we're over the target.
Yeah.
There are so many exciting coincidences. If anyone who's listening to this can log on to nop.substack.com and look at the first Black Friday, the essay with the skull and crossbones for the logo or for the thumbnail image. That one it'll lay it all out there. We're like matching up symbol. It's like the man who led the peasants' revolt is this guy named Wat Tyler, and the Tyler is the name of the guardian man inside the Masonic temple. There's like so many symbological continuities that it really just gets out of hand. One interesting thing that's not in the essay that I'll mention, you may enjoy this. William Cooper, the man who predicted 9/11, was shot in his house the preceding November. On his podcast, he traces the genealogy of the Bush family all the way back to Robert the Bruce and the Scottish Reformation, and notes that and he reads the priests who were the people who there was a bunch of notes from Wat Tyler's and the priests that supported him in the lead up to the peasants' revolt, and the letter that went out was "The time is now," or "Now is the time," and that was the signal that it's time to start the peasants' revolt. And that was the same signal for the American Revolution, the same signal for the French Revolution, like the time is now. Like every faction who's involved in these revolts gets the note saying the time is now. And the time is now was also the campaign slogan of Reagan Bush in 1980. So there's just so many odd things like that. And the man on Reddit didn't account for any of that, just saying, oh, there's no way any of this is true. No. Anyway, so that was an interesting listener feedback to get, just this random person coming out of the woodwork to like try to make it seem like not saying anything about Freemasonry, just trying to destroy any idea that anyone else might have about it. I don't know. Very odd.
All right, that's pretty wild. Okay, so we have another bit of listener feedback.
Yeah. So someone actually sent an email to nop@substack.com. So
It only took 52 episodes.
We did get I do get emails at that email address for people who want to optimize our podcast.
That doesn't count.
Yeah. So it's not like the first email, but it's like the first real one. So I'll just pull it up here. Of course, this is in response to our recent interview with the good Dr. Michael Hudson. This email comes to us from Carla out in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Shout out to Carla. Dear Nathan and Brian, that's you and me. Dear Nathan and Brian, incredible job on your interview of Dr. Hudson, and the transcript is superb. Very nice. I'm grateful to Eve Smith for posting it on Naked Capitalism because the posting also introduced me to system failure. Great to meet you, if only in words on a screen. I think that Dr. Hudson may have made an error in citing his monthly salary back in 1961 as $100. I remember 1961. My father made about $8,000 a year as a violinist in the Cleveland Orchestra, which was about what school teachers earned at the time. He paid a mortgage on a very modest house. Money was always very tight, but all 4 of his children graduated from college without taking college loans. My point is, in 1961, Dr. Hudson may have been able to get a mortgage on a house somewhere with a salary of $100 a week, but not if he earned only $100 a month. Here are some figures that I think you may agree back up my contention, and she's linked to census.gov. Perhaps you could double check with Dr. Hudson on this. Again, congratulations on this interview. Regards, Carla from Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Isn't that nice, Brian? Does that make you feel warm and fuzzies?
It does. Well, we got Dr. Hudson's phone number. We should give him a call right now.
Well, as it turns out, I did check in with Dr. Hudson on this count.
Oh, wow.
So I've got the return note here from Dr. Hudson, and he confirms, yep, $100 a week, $5,200 a year, with my rent being $35 a month in New York City, just near NYU.
How much was his mortgage supposed to be in New York? Do we remember, or does it say?
I don't know. I don't remember. I don't think he specified the amount of his monthly mortgage. It would be back in the interview, so I'm not sure.
In any case, obviously, homes used to be affordable and aren't now.
Yeah. It's, like the rent that's like near Washington Square in Lower Manhattan. I mean, rent there would be $4,000 now. Yeah. Anyway, Michael Hudson just continues. I was really glad to have helped you, meaning you and me, Brian, because your line of questioning led to a very clear progress through my books. That's why Eve agreed to run it. She often disagrees with me. Yeah, Michael. So
awesome.
Yeah. So Eve Smith is there's Adam Smith, right, the classical economist, and this Eve Smith is this nom de plume of the person who runs Naked Capitalism. It's like a pen name, and so it's like Adam and Eve, right? Instead of Adam Smith, Eve Smith, but then Eve is spelled with the Y, the French way, like Eve. So very clever, Brian. So that was thrilling to get that email. It's our first fan letter, and I'm sure it's the first of many to come.
All right. Yeah, I feel all warm and fuzzy inside, like you were saying.
Hell yeah. Great. All right. Well, fall is in the air here, Brian. Our New England Patriots are about to take the field on what promises to be a season of shame and regret. So I suppose we'd ought to leave our podcast there. I'll re-invite our venerable listeners to go ahead and send us an email. Send your email to nop@substack.com. And if you liked our treatment of Carla there, we shall read yours on the air as well. So do send us a note if you feel so inclined. And if you'd like to read exciting essays about the Knights Templar and where the black flag with the skull and crossbones of the pirate ship and what the tie-in is to that, banking and the Knights Templar and the Freemasons, then go ahead over to nop.substack.com.
If you're some kind of shill and want to send us some flack to obfuscate the truth, we invite that as well.
Yeah, we are down for any flack. It means we're over the target, as mentioned.
All right.
All right, everyone. Have a great week. We'll talk to you. I'll be back on Thursday with the Quickie, and then we'll talk to you next week for another full lengther.
All right, bye-bye.